Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to start the process of replacing the bumper on this 2004 Chevy Tahoe. As you can see here, it's developing kind of a rust hole. The other side has got something going on, and before I bought this truck it must have been in some kind of a fender bender because there's a dent right behind the license plate. I actually have a spacer behind the plate to keep it even. So anyway, it's time for this one to go and we're going to try a replacement one. So here's a look at the box that contains the new bumper for the Tahoe. Now I ended up getting this from Amazon, but you can get these anywhere. I'll leave a link to the Amazon product page down in the description in case you want to check that out. But again, you could get this on probably JC Whitney or Rock Auto or anywhere that you can find parts for these Chevy trucks. Anyhow, I think I paid about $130 for this, and that included 1 week or so shipping. So I didn't think that that was too bad of a deal. This is going to be, as you'll see when I take it out of the box, a primered bumper. There is a chrome bumper available as well for a few dollars more if you want to go that route, but my truck is a Z71. It's supposed to have a painted bumper, and I don't really care for chrome anyway, but if you don't feel like trying to paint your bumper, that may be the way to go just to save you that step. Anyway, let's pull it out of the box and have a look at it and see what things look like. So here's a look at the bumper out of the box. As you can see, it's the primered version, and fit and finish on this thing is okay, pretty much in line with what you'd expect from a part from Amazon and made in Taiwan. Not as good as the factory original, of course, but ought to serve the purposes just fine on my old beater. So the first thing that I'm going to do to prep this bumper is I'm going to coat the inside of it with some Plasti-dip. Now, I've never used this stuff before, but a friend of mine recommended this to me, so I figured I'd give it a try. I don't think it can hurt anything. So the idea here is that the Plasti-dip is supposed to create sort of a rubberized, flexible coating on the inside of the bumper that'll resist chipping and moisture and things and prevent it from rusting from the inside out like the original factory one is doing now. So I've got the inside of the bumper kind of all cleaned out, all the loose dust and everything is out of here. So now I'll just kind of coat this and see what happens. So I've got the inside of the bumper all coated with the Plasti-dip. That one can did about 2 solid coats here, so that's pretty good. I tried to get it a little heavier on the corners and on the lower surfaces of the bumper where water and things will kind of collect or spray from the tires would hit. So far so good. It's still a little bit tacky, so I'm going to let it dry for a bit and then we'll move on to the next step. So it's now the next day and I'm getting ready to add another layer of primer to the bumper here. I've got it scuffed up with some 400 grit sandpaper, and I noticed that on this side of the bumper, I don't know if it's visible in the camera or not, but you can see there's some light rust underneath the primer. So I think before I even add my second layer of primer to this, I'm going to put a little bit of rust inhibitor on here just to kind of help with things. Again, just like the Plasti-dip, I don't think it can hurt anything. So let's do that now, and then we'll move on to the primer. Okay, so this is the stuff that I'm going to use. This is Duplicolor Rust Fix, and again, this is more made for applying to kind of bare rust, and it'll kind of convert the rust to primer, but it's what I've got on hand, so that's what I'm going to use. I coated the whole bumper, even though the whole bumper didn't really need it. I'm going to let it cure for a bit, maybe go over it again with the 400 grit paper, and then we'll put a coat of regular sandable primer on here. So the rust converter has dried. This thing has been sitting about, I don't know, 12 to 14 hours or so, basically overnight. So next up what we're going to do is put a coat or two of gray sandable fillable primer on here. Now the reason I'm going to do that is because the factory paint, the silver that we're going to try and match, is somewhat translucent, and having a gray base is going to allow the paint to match the vehicle a little better than if we tried to paint the new silver paint directly over the black. That's pretty much how the factory did it too. The primer on the bumpers there is also gray, so we're going to mimic that with this and see what happens. So as you can see, I've got a couple of coats of primer on here now, and I've sanded it down with some 400 grit just to remove the high spots, and I think we're ready for the first coat of paint. You can see here I'm using this Duplicolor Perfect Match, and this is silver birch metallic, just like what my Tahoe is. I did a test spray, and I think it's a pretty close match, so I think we'll be okay. Good enough for this project anyway. So I'm still waiting for the final coat of paint to dry on the new bumper. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to squirt some PB Blaster on the fasteners that hold everything together here, just to kind of help break up some of the rust. And then the next thing that I'm going to try and do is remove this plastic trim piece from the top of the bumper, because there's a couple of bolts hidden underneath it that we're going to need to get at. Okay, so the next few shots may be a little shaky. I'm going to go freehand since there isn't a whole lot of room, but obviously we're under the truck here behind the bumper, and you can kind of see the rust down there in the corner that's starting. Anyway, what we're looking at is that clip that's up there that I'm shining the light on. That's what holds that plastic trim on. There's a series of those around the top side of the bumper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and use a pair of pliers to just kind of squeeze that gently and then push it out through that slot, and try not to break it so that we can reuse that trim piece. Okay, let's give this a try. I'll see if I can do this with you guys watching the first one. Well, I gotta put the camera down so I can kind of get in here with both hands, but you can kind of see what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to go slow and be gentle so I don't break this thing. As you can see, I've got the first two popped out. What I found to be the easiest thing to do was to squeeze the tab with the pliers with one hand and kind of use the other hand on the outside of the bumper and sort of guide the trim piece away from the bumper with my other hand while squeezing the tab, and then they seem to pop out. So I'm going to continue around and do the rest of them here and see if we can get this trim piece off. As you can see, I was able to get the trim piece off. There it is, flipped upside down, and you can see all the clips there kind of pointing towards us. I managed to get it off with only breaking this one clip. You can see it didn't come all the way off. Now I'll try and glue this one just to see if we can get it to stay. Now that the trim piece is off, you can see some of the rust that was hiding under it. And you can also see the fasteners that were hiding under it. And we're going to remove those in a minute. But first, before I do that, I'm going to remove the bottom valance here. There's some clips that hold it to the bottom of the bumper that we'll take off, and we'll also get the fog lights out of here. Those of you that know Tahoes will know that even though this is a Z71 truck, it's got a standard model valance on it. This is not the correct valance for a Z71. It should have round fog lights and a kind of a smoother valance panel here. I believe that the previous owner had some sort of a fender bender. You can see by the dent in the bumper that was hiding behind the license plate that it suffered some damage. I'm assuming they broke the original Z71 valance and just replaced it with either a junkyard part or the cheapest aftermarket part they could find. Either way, we're going to remove this and then we'll try and get the bumper off of here. Okay, once again, we're under the truck and behind the bumper. You can see the fasteners that hold the valance onto the bottom of the bumper. There's just a handful of those that need to come out around the bumper. Now, my fasteners are not the factory fasteners. These are just something that the previous owner, or maybe the previous owner's mechanic, put on here to kind of hold everything together. Okay, that took a little more effort than it should have, mostly because it was using the incorrect fasteners and they were all just kind of rusted and I couldn't get the nuts off. In fact, I had to cut one off with a hacksaw. Next up, I'm going to remove the two fog lights, and those are just screwed to the bottom of the bumper with 2 screws each. Okay, so let's take a look underneath the bumper. I'm going to start with the bottom bolts. I should be able to remove the one over there in the corner, and there's a nut on a stud here, and then there's 2 bolts in the middle of the bumper directly below the license plate, and then the pattern is repeated on the other side. Here's a nut on a stud and 1 bolt over there in the corner. So after I get the bottom ones out, then I'll go ahead and try and remove the top ones. You can see there's a nut on a stud here, and then there's a bolt there, a bolt directly in the center, a bolt here, and a nut on a stud over here. So I've got all of the bolts off the bottom of the bumper. Now the 2 that I thought were studs were actually bolts with the head on the top, and the bottom part was actually a fastener, and when I tried to unloosen it, it kind of broke the fastener a little bit. So I think we're going to be okay, but the right way to do it is to loosen it from the top or sort of inside surface of the bumper. So anyway, what I've decided to do next is remove the grille. So in order to get the grille off, it looks like I need to pop these plastic clips that are holding this shield to the top of the grille. And then behind the grille, it looks like there's a few of these plastic screws. I don't know if you guys can see them in the camera or not, but they should just twist right out. And then I think maybe the sides back here are clipped into some rubber grommets. Okay, as you can see with the grill out of the way, the bolts are accessible except for the two nuts that are here. So over here under each of the turn signals there's one nut on a stud, and unlike on the bottom, this actually is a stud and not a fastener type arrangement. Anyway, what we need to do is get this turn signal out of the way, and these come out pretty easily. I'm not sure if you guys can see it with this camera angle, but just down here below the corner of the turn signal there's a plastic clip, and you just kind of push that with your finger and pull out, and then this thing just kind of comes out of the way. You can see the clip there. It just kind of squeezes in. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of move this out of the way. I suppose I could unscrew the bulbs and take it completely out of here, but I think if we just hang it up there like that, we should be good. So with all the bolts removed, I should be able to just lift the bumper up over those two studs that are on the sides, and it should come right off. So as you can see, I've got the bumper completely off. Now it looks like the bumper bracket on the right side is not the original bracket. It's got some odd hardware over there too. So I'm assuming that this thing was in a bit of an accident at one time and probably on that side of the truck. Anyway, I think we're good to go. I'm going to let the paint dry a little bit longer on the new bumper and then we can throw it on. Okay, so here's a look at the back side of the old bumper. You can see it was getting pretty rusty, especially over there in that corner. So you may have seen this bracket fall off when I pulled the bumper off, so I guess we didn't need to take those bolts out to get the bumper off the truck anyway. This is more of a stiffening bracket. Well, we're going to want to put it on the new one, but to get the old bumper off, this didn't really need to come off, I guess. Okay, so I've got the bumper all painted up. In addition to the rust fix and the primer, I've got about 4 or maybe 5 coats of the Duplicolor silver. I went through 2.5 cans of that stuff on here just because that paint was real thin. I had to keep layering it in order to get the color right and also to get the coverage right so it wasn't blotchy. But once I got to that 4th or maybe 5th coat, it seemed okay. But it was a little bit dull, so I went and got some Duplicolor clear coat and kind of went over it with that. Still maybe not quite as shiny as the factory finish, but I think it'll be good enough for this. So at the front of the truck here, you may be able to see that all of the bracketry and everything has now been painted black. I went over that with some rust converter and then put some black primer on it just to protect it while I had it exposed. So I think that's it. I think it's time to start putting everything back together now. Before I forget, I need to pull these clips off of the old bumper here. Now these are the ones that I put a socket on because I thought they were just a plain nut. So I kind of broke them loose. These aren't supposed to spin, but it is still captive in this clip. Anyway, I'm going to pull this off and put them on the new bumper. Okay, so we're under the truck and freehand again, and we're taking a look at the bottom of the bumper. You can see the flange there with the clip that I put on it that I stole from the old bumper. And then up there is the bracket that it needs to mate to. Now you may be able to see that that bracket is bent up slightly, and I'm kind of not surprised by that given the condition of the original bumper with the dents in the front. Things were just kind of out of whack, I think. So instead of trying to pull this off and bend those down, I'm going to try and bend them down a little bit with this in the way. I think we can do it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll get the bolts through that hold that on. Okay, so I've got all the bolts on the bumper, but loosely. I don't have them tightened down yet, and everything seems like it's lined up okay. The fit and finish is not perfect, but what do you expect for, you know, Chinese metal? Anyway, the next thing that I'm going to do before I sock everything down is I'm going to put this center bracket back in, and that just goes up behind the bumper, actually goes like this on the inside of the bumper. I probably could have put this on before I put the bumper on, but I figured I'd have less chance of scratching the bumper because I would have had to lay it down on the ground to put this in. So now that this is here, I'm just going to slip it in, bolt it down, and then tighten the rest of the bolts down. It's not going to look much different to you guys, but all the bolts are now tightened up and we're ready to move on to the next step. What I'm going to do next is put this trim piece back on the top of the bumper. Now you may remember from when I took this off, this plastic clip cracked. Didn't come all the way off, it just cracked. And you may be able to see there's some epoxy on there now. I got some plastic epoxy and put it on there. Hopefully it'll hold it together well enough to keep it on the truck, but even if this one fails, I think the rest of them will hold it on just fine. So what I'll do now is just put this back on the opposite way that I took it off. These clips here will kind of fit and click into the oval slots that are in the front of the bumper. So this should go pretty easily. I'm going to try and put the middle one in first, which you can see is in between the two pieces here and vertical, and then I'll work my way out from either edge. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the trim all on and pushed in place. Now, it doesn't fit exactly perfectly in the corners, and I kind of expected it wouldn't. As you can see, the corners of the metal really aren't formed all that good. You can see all these wrinkles in here. I didn't bother trying to get those out of here. I mean, it is what it is, but the trim does kind of go over it, just doesn't fit quite as nice as it probably should. But otherwise, it seems to fit in there okay, and that one clip that I glued seems to be holding up okay. So next up, I'm going to put the grille back in place. The way this goes in is that this metal clip that's on either end of the grille is going to fit into a slot that's in between the headlight and the turn signal on either side, and that'll kind of get it loosely positioned in. And then we've got these 4 twist locks that go over pegs that are in the front of the truck there, and then we just do a half a turn and that should lock it into place. So just for the sake of reference, I'll try and show this here. You can see the plastic twist lock clip here on the grille. I'm going to push this down and you can kind of see this plastic peg that's got sort of a vertical look to it. And this goes over that. There's also a peg on the back of the grille that goes into a slot in the plastic right behind this tab. And we just do sort of a quarter turn really to get it locked into place. And there is one real screw here that goes in the grille on this tab, and that's right above and to the right of the Chevy symbol. Okay, and then we have these plastic push pin clips that clip this shield down to the top of the grille. Now half of the ones on this thing are missing, so I'm just going to kind of distribute the ones I have left evenly. And these just kind of just pop in and then push down like that and you're good to go. So next up, what I'm going to do is put some new plastic clips in here for the license plate. Now normally I'd probably do that last, but I want to get the plate on here so I can drive the truck down to the hardware store and find some new fasteners for the lower valance panel. So what I'm going to use is this kit that I picked up at the local auto parts store. I already cut the top off so I could get at the stuff, but you can see that it's just got the plastic clips that fit in the holes and some stainless steel screws for the plate. So we'll just clip these in and we should be good to go. So I went to put my license plate on and I realized that the supplied stainless steel screws are a Torx bit, but they have that little security tab in the middle. So you'll either need to grind that out or use a security Torx bit like the one I have here. One thing to mention on the license plate fasteners, you guys probably noticed it in the video. I didn't notice it, but they give you the security Torx bit that you need right with the package. So if you don't have your own, like I do, there's one here for you. So I'm going to save that and put it in the tool drawer in case I lose my bit. Okay, so I just got back from Tractor Supply and I got some hardware there. Now, I haven't really shopped at Tractor Supply too much over the years, but a friend of mine clued me into the fact that they sell loose hardware like this by the pound. So you can get a bunch of stuff like this a lot cheaper than you can get it at the hardware store or maybe even Home Depot and stuff. Anyway, I'm just going to use some 1/4 bolts on this thing. So I really wanted to use carriage bolts since the bottom of the bumper, if you guys recall, has square holes in it for those original GM fasteners. I thought a carriage bolt head would fit in there nice and prevent it from spinning around, but my Tractor Supply was sort of low on carriage bolts, at least of the size I needed. But anyway, I just got regular quarter 20 bolts. That should do. Got some washers on there and some nuts. Of course, these are all going to be made from Chinesium, so who knows what the quality is, but they ought to work for this. So I've got all the bolts in, the valance panel is on, so I think we're pretty much done here. So overall, I think everything came out okay for what everything is here. Now, the Chinese bumper, the quality is a little bit, kind of iffy. You guys may have seen in the video, I'll show a picture here, but the corners and where the metal is bent really isn't finished quite the way that I'd like it to be. Now, I could have spent some time trying to fix that myself, but I'm not a metal worker and I didn't want to spend a lot of time with Bondo and things like that, so I just kind of left it the way it was and painted over it. I think it'll be fine. And when you're buying stuff from China, you have to expect that this is kind of the quality that you're going to end up with. But I'm happy with the way that the color matched. I wasn't sure if the Duplicolor would match the factory color, but it seems to be pretty close. So I think overall, for the amount of money that I have invested in this, I think it's okay for a beater like this anyway. If you'd like to learn more about the products that I used in this project, including the bumper and the paint, please check the description below for links to the Amazon product pages. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.